Hello, and welcome to Your Killer Life podcast. I'm your alternative host, Griff Woodford. I am here with a cool guy by the name of Mike Baltierra. Mike, you want to say hi?
Hey, how's it going, everybody? As Griff said, my name is Michael Baltierra. I am located in Covington, Washington, and I used to work with Tammey, who was Griff's significant other a few years ago, actually a little more than a few years ago, probably about a decade ago, and we've kept in contact ever since. And I'm glad to be here today. I'm glad to have been asked to do this with Griff, and I'm looking forward to the topic and whatever it is we want to discuss today.
Yeah, likewise, man. So for our listeners, what we're discussing today effectively is on the same cancer train. The difference being from the perspective of the caregiver, and in a smaller subset for that is the male aspect of caregiver. So why is this important? Right. So what will typically, I won't say typically, I don't want to generalize, but often cases, the person with the disease, they're the one that gets the focus, right? Where in order to support that person, well, exactly that, the primary person who is supporting that is often kind of left in the shadows, and that can create problems.
I'm only talking from a parent's perspective. I'm not talking from a partner's perspective, or even with my dad going through prostate cancer about 20 years ago. When you as a parent have a child that's going through a dreadful disease, unfortunately, both my twins have gone through something. My son, Zach, who's the oldest twin, he went through stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma twice. His younger brother, or his twin brother, went through Rasmussen's encephalitis when he was 6. And so we've actually gone through 3 stages, because Zach had cancer twice, 3 stages of caregiving, trying to take care of children who went through life-threatening illnesses or things that could be pretty catastrophic. And so the female is always expected to be the one who's always going to be there while the male or the whomever partner, however you want to look at, the gender roles today, goes to work, puts foot on the table, and makes sure that everything's taken care of financially and with insurance and whatever else. Whereas the mother or whomever is designated as the caregiver is the one who's supposed to be the one left behind, who's going to provide initial bedside care when they're not at a medical facility, get the medications needed to whomever. And though you're really, really focused and you really are occupied a great majority of the day, at when it's your time to take a break, so to speak, that's the time where you sit there and reflect and you wonder, what is going on? How am I going to do some self-care? How can I take care of myself, and where can I get the support that I need? Because a lot of people think, especially when you're a guy, oh, you could just suck it up, just put in some intestinal fortitude and just carry on with your day. Dude, you're there to set the example, when in reality, the whole thing is you're actually crumbling and you're falling apart mentally, emotionally, and if you're spiritually as well, because it makes you question if there's another being outside of this world, why is he picking on my children? And is he trying to set an example? Did I do something wrong in a previous life or something? And you always have these doubts and these questions, and you don't have an answer for it. And you don't have anybody who you can, you have friends or you have buddies who you may have hobbies with, or you may have something in common with. But the problem is, when none of them have ever gone through any of this, they have no idea how to react when you reach out for help.
Absolutely. And my experience with caregiving obviously is certainly different than yours, not from a parent perspective, but as you mentioned, a significant other. My brief background in what I did has been effectively in the combat field my entire adult life, aside from the last 4 years, really, which was effectively Tammy's diagnosis. The high stress career, that type of thing, it attracts a certain personality type, which, to your point, always kind of expecting that the feminine element of a relationship or a unit is the one in charge of caregiving. It often feels like the masculine has a disadvantage in that. We're not necessarily, I won't say built, but our biology doesn't necessarily reflect that shepherding aspect. It's the hunter gatherer, right? Just is exactly as you said. The one going out, providing, making sure the caretaker is taken care of, or the person that needs care has the, appropriate financial stability and that type of thing.
Also from a younger age too, we're also, as men, we're ingrained from society, even from family members, that, you're not allowed to show emotion. You're not allowed to be upset. You're not allowed to wear your heart on your sleeve. You're a guy. You're the rock. You have to be concrete. You have to be the one who sets the example for everybody else. If you want to make it through these difficult times, then you gotta, like I said earlier, you gotta suck it up. And that's not fair, because that's why I found a lot of my friends who suffer from depression or anxiety, because they've never had an outlet to be able to. They don't have that safety valve that most people may have, whether it's going to train martial arts or going to the gym or whatever else. So a lot of these people are also, they're not introvert. They're very introverted. They're not extroverts. So they have a hard time showing their emotions. They have a hard time expressing themselves to others. And so that's why, a great majority of the people I know who have done any type of oncology care or any type of caregiver services for their loved ones, they are suffering, and they're suffering in silence, and there's no one out there to listen to them.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I mean, from young age, and my personal career path, I mean, that was just a staple. That was not negotiable. You are mission oriented all the time. It's not saying that you can't have emotion, but the job always comes first. There is not that. This is your allotted decompression or self-introspection time. Is mission first. When you're done, you take the time that you can, then you move on right back to mission. And the reality is that there's a lot of far-reaching implications in that mindset, and it does develop into the caregiver mindset, particularly for male caregivers. Again, I don't like to generalize, but from the breast cancer perspective, that's obviously the majority of that is women. And to me now, anyway, it's a pretty obvious parallel why the divorce rate is so incredibly high between husband and wife who experience that, really any oncology type treatment or cancer-oriented disease, because there is that, I won't say one-sided, but I will in some cases say unfair expectation of both parties to not just have to go through this horrifying and traumatic disease, but also maintain a societal and social norm of a gender role, for lack of a better term, right? When in reality, this is a communal partnership. It's not about race or gender. It's about what each person needs in that moment in order to be successful. I would say the reason why it's not more common knowledge of that is because it's freaking hard, man. Like it's difficult to be vulnerable with someone who is already vulnerable in a vulnerable state. And as a guy, and I'll speak for myself and myself alone on this one, when I would see Tammey hurting in any capacity, whether it was physical care or psychological care, my stuff goes out the window. I do not care about what I'm feeling right now. My job is to make her better, at least as better as I possibly can with the skill sets that I have, the experience that I have. It was about a year and a half of that, of just powering through. And then, holy crap, man. Like it was just about, cut the parachute time. Really, I have no one to blame but myself on that. And fortunately, within that year and a half, we developed the strength and bond of a relationship that allowed for kind of that effective meltdown, right? And understanding that, it's about time, dude. And like that was pretty much her exact statement is like, well, where have you been the whole time? You have this ability. You just need to talk to me about it, right?
So in order to keep my son motivated throughout his, first his chemotherapy treatments and then eventually his bone marrow transplant, I wouldn't show any emotion in front of him at all. I would save it for, this sounds really lame, just go in the shower for 20 minutes and just cry, Yeah. What can you do? My son and I, we both trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So the times I would go to the gym, I would be able to sit with my friends and talk to them. And, they would always offer encouragement. And, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little emotional here, but, it was hard. It's a hard time. And
that's the point of the podcast, man. So, we're looking for that emotion, and that is not just an okay thing, but the appropriate thing to display when you're talking about something like this. It's critical. And what we're both experiencing right now, that's the primary catalyst to success or failure in a caregiving relationship, is being able to show that and, realize that it's not just okay. It's mandatory. You have to do this or it destroys you. It's just that simple.
And then the hard part too is when you have to go and explain to your employer, like, hey, I need all this time off, or I need to take care of myself. And then they don't quite understand what you're going through. So they really aren't too willing to be flexible, so to speak, or accommodating. And, when my son first went through cancer the first time, the people that I was working with at the time, they were like, take the time that you need. The work will always be here. Do what you can if you do it remotely from the. So I had a lot of downtime with him at the hospital. So I would just log in, get my work done, and piece of cake, and then when I come back, it's like, okay, all your projects are caught up. What happened? Well, what am I going to do during this 48-hour stay during chemotherapy? I'm just going to log in and do my work, and keep me occupied. And then, the second time unfortunately, it wasn't as accommodating. Oh, excuse me for a second.
Yep.
Oh, man. Okay. Allergies.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I got hit in the face with a rock. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it's challenging. It's a hard challenge.
It is. Well, yeah, absolutely. And it's really not just interesting, but kind of cool. What you just brought up is kind of that short term, I can do it. I'll do anything you need type thing. I've not like with employers or family or friends or something like that. I've noticed, at least in my case, families, they're pretty into it. Like they're there for the long term. But there's this big misconception, whether it's with the actual patient or the caregiver, that this is supposed to take a specific amount of time. And usually like that overwhelming volume of support, whether it's through social media or through, personal interaction or relationships, it's like 2 months. You get like 2 months of, this flood of anything that you need, anything we can do, we're there for you. And then it just kind of drops off. And, my experience is it took us 4 years from diagnosis to getting back to a semblance of positive control over our own lives, where we're not having to deal with the hospital visits, the recovery times, the psychological aspects of this. It was 4 years, man. So, and that's, I'm directing that at even just the patient, let alone the caregiver aspect is in that sense, you're not even on the radar. The patient is the one that is getting that support. Once that drops off, then it's just it's not. You're expected to go back to business as normal. And fortunately for Tammey and I, we were both in professions where we really could set our own hours and control the amount of workload that we had without missing a mortgage payment or something like that. But the overwhelming majority cannot do that. And I would say that's one of the hardest parts, and not just my own experience, but the observed experience of others, the other kind of cancer buddies that we have. That is a huge contribution to just the overall psychological stress of the disease, and any long-term disease, not just oncology related, but that kind of expectation that, okay, well, it's been X months or a year or something like that. Like, why are you not back in the office type thing?
Right, exactly.
That's not how that works, man. This is a long-term process.
Right. Not to discredit any of the companies. I understand they have products and they have revenue they need to generate, but as we're seeing today, giving the people the ability to work remotely is paramount, especially right now with what's going on. I'm just glad the mindset is shifting to, instead of having asses and seats, you can have people work from the house and they can still be just as productive. I think some of it has to do with people wanting just to micromanage others. I'm not saying one particular person, but it could just be a whole span of people. Just, they have to be in the know. They have to have their hands in everything. But you trust your troops, so to speak. You sound like you're a military guy. You prior service?
Yeah. And a bunch of other stuff after that. Yeah.
So I was in the Marine Corps, and one of the things they always taught us was leadership. You have to put your faith in your troops, trust them enough to do the work. If they screw up, the first time you're emphatic, you're just like, hey, you know what? You did a decent effort, but you did this wrong. Let's try and correct it the next time. But if they keep screwing up, that's when you counsel them. And that needs to transfer over. And then, I understand a lot of people hate the military. I get it. But when you have people who don't have any idea on how to be a leader, but they're a boss, then it causes friction. And that causes,
Yes, it does.
and so then the one thing, I mean, what branch were you in, if you don't mind me asking?
Army. I was Army.
Okay. So you may have a code of ethics, or you may have like we had the Rifleman's Credo, we had the Brotherhood, we had the Esprit de Corps. It doesn't matter how much you hate someone, doesn't matter how much you love one of your fellow men. We're all on the same team. You kick, someone gets kicked, someone gets knocked down, you help them up. You're only as fast as your slowest guy. And that's, I think that's how, once people start understanding those leadership principles, and then it actually makes them a better person. So it just, I honestly believe that once people start to come to the realization that, you don't have to sit there and watch what people are doing all the time, just have a check-in maybe once or twice a month, maybe 3 times or once a week, whatever the case may be, to make sure the person is on track. That's all that matters.
In-state focus.
Exactly. And then I can use that person, whomever, whether it's a father or a mother or, whomever, that they're taking care of their significant other, their children, then they can take care of business during the day. And then when they have a downtime, they can get focused on work. Because I don't know about you, man, sitting in the office 8 hours of the day, half the day spent in meetings anyway. So that's a big time suck. So
Exactly. Workplace efficiency. And that that's another thing that really does contribute, not just to, caregiver and the patient, but the family of that as well. If just the unit period, because we all have to work, that's it. That's non-negotiable, particularly going through a disease like that, where even with, really high test insurance, it's exceptionally expensive out of pocket type thing. So, also the workplace efficiency, how able is that, in your case particular, how able are you to actually focus on work that needs to be done as opposed to what is just kind of being mixed in the pot, as it were, just to kill time, to check the block on time in an office type thing. So this is a multifaceted thing, and that's certainly not going to be one episode. I think we'll probably end up revisiting this as well.
And then another thing too is you were talking about the financial responsibilities as well as time in the office. So I know this is going to sound really, really bad or morbid, but after my son was considered in remission in 2006, something in the back of my mind told me, like, you know what, just be prepared. And so I didn't take any vacation time or any PTO. So when the time came for him to spend a month at Seattle Children's Hospital for his bone marrow transplant recovery, I had enough time on the books where I can just take time off and not worry about, hey, when are you going to be back in the office? So that was taken care of. One thing that people don't know either, and they don't know unless you tell them, or unless they have the smarts to go look for it themselves, is financial assistance. People don't know that every hospital out there has got resources for those who can't afford to pay their bills. All you have to do is just go to the finance department and just say, hey, you know what? I may have a single income, or I just lost my job, or I'm put on FMLA. I don't have a source of income. What can I do? And then chances are they're going to give you an application for financial assistance. Luckily, my children, or especially Zach, he was an adult. So technically he had no income. So he got approved for financial assistance. So whatever the insurance didn't pay, it was all taken care of through grants and funds that the hospital had in reserve. People need to really look into that, because the last thing you want to do is go bankrupt because you can't afford your hospital bills, or you want some overzealous 21-year-old out of college who's working for a credit collector coming after you for a $5 copay you couldn't afford.
Right. Absolutely. And, that was, in our case in particular, that was a long-term struggle as well, as getting the financial aspect squared away. And again, even having really very decent insurance, both of us, it was a mess, quite frankly. I mean, because exactly what you said, there's this removal of humanity and morality when it comes to how the insurances interact with the patients or the people going through care who require care. It's hard to maintain faith in a system when, at least in our aspect, there was very little humanity involved, put it that way. I mean, we've talked a lot about a lot of aspects of being a caregiver, because there are a lot of them. So I want to ask, what was the hardest part for you to adapt to during the process? What was just the most difficult part about being in a caregiving role as a guy?
My son Zach's pretty stoic himself. He'll never be the one to show you if he's having a bad day or if he's upset about something. And so they're having the talk with him, like, hey, dude, let it out, man. We're all human. It doesn't hurt to hurt. So, but just this, watching my son suffer, that was the hardest.
I would agree pretty much wholeheartedly with what you just said. Seeing the person that you love the most in some cases suffer. I mean, that as far as that emotional impact, that was the biggest one for me. As far as the skill set, I would kind of call it skill set. And also what you mentioned is not just saying that, it's okay to be having a hard time, but also having to learn very small cues from that person to know without having to ask that, okay, you are in trouble here. So, having that information, how can we fix that type thing? That was actually quite a learning curve for me. It's not something I ever really had to, at least in that context, really had to put a lot of emphasis on. I would have to say it's a really common theme as to any caregiver, what the struggles are. And on that note, we have different stories of caregiving, of course, but do you think the relationship of care matters in relation to what we go through as caregivers? For you, it's your son. For me, it's my wife. Do you think there's a lot of differences to, the issues that accumulate for us in that caregiving?
Well, I'm not quite understanding your question, but I'm guessing that has it changed my perspective on how I treat others? Absolutely. You tend to see who your true friends are and who your true family members are when you go through a struggle. And those who still can treat you, those who treat you pretty poorly, then you can just cut them out of your life if you have to, if you don't have to deal with them on a daily basis, that is, or a weekly basis, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, I mean, our family is definitely a lot closer than we used to be. At least my wife and my children are, and myself. That is, I've grown closer to a good group of my friends, and there are family members I have where we just grown further apart. So it ebb and flows. You get good people coming into your life, and you got the good people leaving. So, and then you have those who just don't understand what you're going through, and they don't understand why you can't hang out with them, or hey, all his treatments are over with, dude. Why can't you just come and hang out? Well, just we were told that, he may have side effects up to 10 to 14 days after his treatment. And sadly, that happened where he had a really gnarly allergic reaction to one of his immunotherapy meds, and, ended up in critical care for a week and almost killed him. And so, people don't quite understand. And you just get people who think that nothing bad's ever going to happen to them, so they still treat everybody else like garbage. And one of those days they'll get a wake up call. Karma, it tends to cash itself out tenfold. So
typically, that's actually a really good answer. It's kind of the one I was hoping for. The reality is, again, it doesn't matter what the relationship is. It doesn't matter what the disease is that there are so many common threads of the caregiver and the patient role. And I really like where you went with this is because, same thing for us as well as, starting with this large group of what, we would consider support, right? And then realizing that group is a lot smaller than we thought. And I would say for us anyway, is it became a lot easier to A, recognize, and then B, get rid of those negative influences, those negative presences that, we just assumed, right, through interaction or casual friendship that, oh, yeah, these people are good to be around. In effect, our give a shit pretty much just broke, right? It became a lot more important to focus on what is actually important as opposed to the facade of something important. That's what I would see as one of the rewards of caregiving and just going through on both parties, both the person who requires care and the caregiver. That's the next thing I wanted to ask you is, where do you see the reward as being a caregiver? I think and you did touch on that a little bit already, but I'd like to, kind of delve into that a little bit more because it's, so far it's just been all the horrible stuff of being a caregiver and going through disease. And the reality is that it's not just that.
You're right. And, the on the flips on the bottom side are the dark side of being a caregiver. And it's morally, maybe because it's just my opinion and the way I look at things. when I see people complain and bitch and moan about stuff that's just so petty and trivial, you're like, dude, your life's not that bad.
Yeah.
So what? Your favorite football team lost, or it doesn't matter. There's other things to worry about. On the positive side, though, you learn to live every day as if it's your last, or to be aware of the unexpected. I mean, I don't. I'm trying to phrase it in a way that doesn't make me sound too much like a dick, but there may be days where I don't feel like doing anything. That's fine. But if there's things I want to do, I'm going to make sure I get it done. One of the things that Zachary and I talked about was we were going to travel more this year before this whole pandemic thing started happening. So we're going to have to put that on the back burner for a little bit. But, just being able to go out and enjoy life, whether it's just going for a drive, whether it's going hiking, whether it's going out to do photography, whether it's to go out and watch our favorite bands play. We never had anything that we couldn't do. There wasn't anything we didn't want to do. And that was on top of going to jiu-jitsu 3 to 5 days a week and just going to work. I would go to work and, do what I needed to do, come home, and then we would go have a good time. And, you mentioned earlier the divorce rate. I see more people, and not necessarily caregivers, but some of them may be caregivers, but they also divorce over things that may have already been in place before all this cascaded into a big financial and emotional roller coaster. So luckily, my wife and I, we've been together we got married in 93, so we started dating in 91. So we've been together for a little bit. And the only times we ever talked about splitting up was because we didn't have any money. And once you start to realize that money is important, but it's not the end all be all, then you have to start. My jiu-jitsu coach, James Foster, talks about, making 3 columns with 2 different colors of ink, and the stuff you can't control, stuff that you can somewhat control, and things you definitely have control over. Then once you start to realize what you don't have any control over or some little control over, those become things you shouldn't really worry about. And once you start discarding that out of your life becomes much better. And you start to accept how things go. So when people always ask me, like, well, how do you deal with your son having cancer twice? And it's like, well, you know what? Life deals you shitty cards sometimes. You just have to roll with it. And you just have to hopefully, pull out your ace out of your pocket and you get a full house or something. You just got to be mentally positive. And I do believe in the power of positive reinforcement. So, people just got to stop thinking so negatively about stuff, especially stupid shit you can't control.
That's great, Mike. And that actually rolls into kind of our next subject in the podcast. And that's called the locus of control. The modality of how we process our fate, more or less, right? And what you just said is the exact example of that. So locus of control is kind of on a sliding scale between internal control and external control. So for our listeners here, the definition of locus of control is the degree to which people believe that they, as opposed to external forces, have control over the outcome of events in their lives. Concept was developed by Julian P. Rotter in 1954 and has since become an aspect of personality studies. So from the caregiver perspective, at least in this context, the hardship and just speaking for myself, but this is also observed experience of others. One of the biggest hardships that I went through is trying to control everything. And that, my prior career reflected that. I mean, that was what you do, particularly in a leadership element of that career path, is you're responsible for controlling everything. And getting to a place where you don't have control anymore over so many things, being able to exactly what you just said, the 3 columns, right? What you can control, what you can't control, and maybe even what you would like to control. The reality of, actually, I'll back up a little bit, because I was asked the same question: is how are you dealing with cancer, with Tammey having cancer? And this was later on, once I kind of got that light bulb moment of what my responsibilities actually are. And I said, well, I'm not dealing with that. I'm dealing with my responsibilities as they come up. I'm not dealing with cancer. I'm dealing with being able to make sure that Tammey is comfortable, that she gets to doctor's appointments on time, that she's recovering properly. I'm not thinking about cancer. I'm thinking about her in that moment, which is an exact reflection of what you just said. And that's where I have personally, I mean, not just my own personal experience, but the observed experience of others, where particularly from a man's perspective, we're, again, I'd say even socially conditioned that we're the guys that fix stuff. We're the repairmen of problems, period. That locus of control, when centered towards the internal, becomes a real double-edged sword. And the thing is that after a certain point, particularly when a disease takes years to even get through a manageable portion of, that element of control and being so hyper-focused on controlling everything, you can't sustain that. Like that is the definition of burnout. So to exactly your point is figuring out, what can I not control? What am I not supposed to try and control? And what are my actual responsibilities? And that's not just as a caregiver. That's as a person, right? I mean, it's a pretty far-reaching application of what the really important aspects of your job as a human on this earth are. So good stuff, man. Really good stuff.
So my question to you, while you were going through this, what was your safety outlet? What did you do to take care of yourself while you were, because I can tell you what I did, but I want to hear what Griff did.
Well, for me, it was a couple of things, really two main aspects, and ideally very intertwined. If it was something that was developing, emotionally within me that was not necessarily reflective of Tammy's thing and our relationship, I go outside, I hunt, I fly fish. That's my where my soul lies, is in the wilderness. So doing that is my kind of immediate fix, recharge type thing. Ultimately, I would say the biggest mode of self-care for me was just talking with my wife. I mean, we are in this together. As far as I'm concerned, the majority of my day, she's the only person that matters to me. And not just I would say particularly in the caregiver aspect, like that is my majority of my focus on a daily aspect. So rather than trying to shield her from what I'm experiencing and trying to self-correct any, emotional or psychological difficulties I'm having, is being able to bring those to her and develop a mutual solution, not just something I have to go figure out on my own. I've seen from other, again, kind of cancer buddies that have not really been successful in a relationship due to those roles, is that's one of those things that is missing consistently. And I'm sure that there are existing struggles or difficulties in a relationship, but going through something like that and not being in that capacity of, this is the person that I am relying on for, and I should say that we are the people relying on each other for our solutions, right? So really that's the number one. I mean, just being open, honest, and in some cases very vulnerable with my wife, because we are a unit. This is not a one-man show.
Understood. The thing for me was, to stay occupied, so I didn't have a whole lot of time to let my mind wander. And so that meant, when I'm not with Zach at his oncology appointments, or if I wasn't at work, it was going to the gym to train with my jiu-jitsu buddies, because, it just, the whole team spirit, the whole esprit de corps, the brotherhood, that we had in the military, it's there in jiu-jitsu, whether we want to admit it or not, because it definitely, each gym is different, but the team I belong to, we definitely believe in family. We're all a family, and we all take care of each other. And the second aspect was, and my son Zach gave me a whole bunch of riffraff over this, but I filmed a lot of footage while we were going through this, and we had some vlogs that we put up every couple of days, and we also vlogged his bone marrow transplant, because we wanted people to see, hey, because you go out and look for stuff, and there's really no information out there except for people who are like, oh, I'm on day 7 post-treatment, but you never get to see the actual treatment or what they go through for like the stem cell collection and, everything everything else. So we did all that. And I think I have enough footage and I'm actually going to start working on it soon now that I got a lot more free time, is I'm going to put out a little documentary about his cancer journey.
That would be awesome.
Even though I don't get a whole lot of views on it, which is fine. I do get important questions emailed to me. Like I had someone from Kuwait email me. It's like, hey, my dad's going through Hodgkin's lymphoma for the third time. He went through chemo, went through the bone marrow transplant. Now he's got because when you have Hodgkin's lymphoma, unlike leukemia, if you do have a bone marrow transplant, they have what they call autologous transplant, which is where you're your own donor. They collect your own stem cells and then they just blast you full of chemo. And then they give you your stem cells back. If it's successful, great. You don't relapse. You live life. Unfortunately, there's a small percentage of people who still have to worry about cancer coming back. And then, unfortunately, this gentleman, his father experienced that, and they were going to come to Seattle Cancer Care Alliance. So like, hey, would you mind answering some questions? So instead of just putting together an email form, like, hey, let's make a video. And so he was really happy about that. So I do believe in the power of social media and getting the message out there to people, because there's going to be that one person who's going to find your stuff, and you're going to answer the questions for them, and they're going to send you a thank you note. And this is not the first time it's happened. It happened also when Zachary's twin brother Josh, when they were 6, was going through his Rasmussen's battle, and we would do updates on our website, and we would get emails like, hey man, I'm glad you're doing this, because we live in the UK and we're on a waiting list here to get this done, and we don't know what to expect. And so there's, like I said, there's always going to be that small percentage you're going to find you. They're going to thank you for doing it. So
that is absolutely right. And that's really cool. Like, this is actually going pretty well. So all the stuff that I've written down as far as bullet points, you're kind of really seamlessly just leading right into. It's pretty rad. So
kind of funny how that works out.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So the kind of the parting shot here, where I'd like to go with this is, finding, our own roles once the real scary part of the disease and the scary part of caretaking begins to subside. Once you can kind of get out of that sympathetic nervous system response of everything's terrifying all the time, and realize that, because we've been in this process, roles have changed, ideas and goals have now changed. And what you just said is also, I think, a really critical component of the caregiver role in general, is once there is that more or less in state, because you're never really done. There's always that kind of overhead thought of, if it comes back, when it comes back, that type of thing. But once you're able to kind of normalize and get into a new routine, I can't see how it's not the responsibility of both the caregiver and the patient to try to provide some guidance for others who are just beginning in this process, because it's a hard one. It really is.
Yeah. And I'm always one to let people know, if you have questions, don't be afraid to ask, whether it,
right.
Especially if it's directed towards me, because it's something I don't want anybody to go through without a whole lot of information. I don't want them to go through a period. If we all lived in a perfect world, no one would ever have to go through these dreaded diseases. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And some of us are just predisposed to, genetic makeups make us more prone to diseases. And that, I'm sure Tammey knows that. My son Zach knows that, because he always blamed himself. But then he finally came to the realization that it's just genetic. You don't get Hodgkin's lymphoma environmentally. It's just part of his DNA makeup or gene makeup. So, and trying to pass information to people when, we're lucky. We're in the Seattle area. We've got really good resources for oncology services, whether it's through Seattle Children's or UW or Fred Hutch or SCCA, or Seattle Cancer Care Alliance. A lot of people don't have resources like that. They may be in some rural area and they have some mom and pop doctor office they go to, and and they just don't get the care that they need, or they don't have the answers for these people. And, and if people find me and they are like, hey, dude, sorry to bother you, can I talk to you about something? Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't care what time of the day it is. You can drop me an email. I'll get back to you.
Yep. Yeah, and the exact same here. Tammey obviously is a lot more active with that. She's a lot more of a personality than I am. I'm, the kind of the introverted behind the scenes guy. But even still, there is that outreach, and where I personally have felt my responsibility is to help facilitate what Tammy's doing and to help broaden that scope. And also exactly why we're doing the podcast right now is this is something that I actually did a bit of a YouTube search, and other than seeing some of your videos, there's not a lot of perspective from caregiver, and there's even less from male caregiver on this. And I mean, this is it's critical to not just the individual in the unit, but also how it is viewed on a societal level. What not just the caregiver and also the patient need to be successful, but that as a unit, how can we return to being productive? How can we return to being effectively self-sufficient, right? And timelines for that.
Yeah, I just wanted to dovetail off your last comment about males not, especially caregivers, not putting information out there about their own experiences and being, the one that take care of everything. So I found when I was doing the same thing, I was looking for just information from people who've gone through bone marrow transplants or people who've gone through oncology visits for the second time within a short amount of time. Because unfortunately, this is, Zach had spent the last better part of 5 years going through cancer. Then he had maybe a 2.5 year break, and then unfortunately came back. And I would find people who put out videos they're like, oh yeah, I'm they're the patient. It's not the caregiver. Their parents didn't want to talk, or their significant other didn't want to talk. And there's one girl I found who's, I don't know exactly where she's at. I think she's in the Midwest because she keeps talking about going to the Mayo Clinic for her treatments. And she's going through the same thing Zach went through, but her husband's never the one doing any of the videos. It's just her talking about, things are coming up and things are, this, that, and the other. And just talking about her triumphs and talking about her, some of the things, some of the setbacks that she had, or, just some of the frustrations she has also because of the game, the process, the bureaucratic red tape you have to go through to get stuff done. And that's one thing that people need to understand is like, yes, your insurance is there to help you, but they're also there to make money, and they're also there to not spend money. And there are going to be times where you're going to be fighting tooth and nail for your insurance. Or if you get lucky, you're going to have a really good provider who's going to do the battle for you. And we were lucky. Seattle Children's, they took care of everything. Seattle's been getting a bad rap recently because of some of the stuff that's been going on, like with mold and stuff. I mean, it's sad. It's unexcusable. I understand that, but they got a lot of construction going on. I'm not making excuses for them, but people see the bad side of everything, and then they just start hammering on it. And it's just like, for all the little things that are bad that you find, they do a whole lot of stuff that's really, really good. And one of the things that they do really, really good, they take care of their people. They take care of their patients. And you're not just a number. You are actually an individual there that makes, that they know you're important. They don't treat you like just another person in a bed. And, everybody at Children's was awesome. And if you can find that caregiver, not the caregiver, but if you can find the medical provider that's actually going to be there to support you and offer words of encouragement and are emotional with you when you have your breakdowns, then you found a good person to take care of you.
Yeah, that's great information. That's it's a hard thing to find too. Particularly in the beginning of the process. It starts usually with the primary care physician type thing, right? You realize you have a cough or something's not quite right, and then it just progresses into this. Oh, holy shit, this is bad. Then the different doctor interviews through oncologists, through surgeons. Frankly, it's overwhelming. And, I was fortunate to be with Tammey, who really knew what she was doing from the start. Like, she had done her research. She knew the best course of treatment for her based on data, based on statistics. And she was set in that, so that helped us weed that out quite a bit. But there's so many that are just completely blindsided by, the killer diagnosis, right? And are just kind of left twisting in the wind. So any resources for people like that, I mean, thank you for bringing those to attention for sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And also one thing that people don't understand or they don't know about, I didn't know about this until I looked into it, is that your insurance or your employer also may have advocates for you as well. If you don't have the resources to get stuff done, whether it's for financial reasons or healthcare coverage, or in my case was just needed someone to talk to try and get, someone to talk to, whether it's for therapeutic reasons or not. There are people who are third party representative of the employees, not the employer, who are there to make sure that, that you're taken care of without any bias or any type of animosity or any type of blowback. So, and that's how it should be. It's not your fault that you can't come to work because you have people to take care of. And if you get shit on because of that, then and if they want to let you go, or if it's time to move on, then you have to ask yourself, how important is this paycheck? And unfortunately, a lot of people go through that. They have to make up their mind as to whether they're going to go to work, or they're going to take care of their significant other, or they're going to take care of their children. It's pretty shitty. You have to make that decision. But in today's world, it could be at any time in time, any point in time. But yeah, man, I don't think you should have to make that decision. So I'm really glad that Washington State's taking the right direction and letting people pay for FMLA time off, through the deductions in their starting the first of this year, or I think it was this year. But FMLA only guaranteed that you had a job and they didn't have to pay you, and you had to take your PTO first. But at least now you have some type of stipend coming your way because you're actually paying into a program that's actually similar to your insurance. So hopefully we'll start following other countries' rules or their guidelines in regards to like time off or maternity care or paternity care or long-term care, whatever the case may be, because, man, being a slave to the grind really sucks.
Yes, it does. And it does. It's just, again, one more critical thing to add on top of, potentially losing one of the most important people in your life. There's, so yeah, absolutely right. And, thank you again for the information and just a freaking rad interview, man.
Thanks. If there's anybody out there who wants to check out some of the Zach cancer videos, if you find me on YouTube, you can find me MJ, which is my first two initials for Michael John, and then Baltierra, which is B as in boy, A-L, T as in Tom, I-E-R-R-A. So MJ Baltierra. That's on YouTube. If you want to check out some of my videography stuff, that's at mikebaltierra.com. And also you can find me on Instagram at Mike Baltierra Photo. So those are the three ways you can find me online. And those are the three places I'm always going to be responding to. And if you need to get a hold of me, there's a contact form on my webpage, or you can just send me an email at hello@mikebaltierra.com.
All right. Awesome, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate you.
Again, I'd like to thank all our listeners for joining us, and we will see you next week.